They didn't even give me shoes. That's the part one keep coming back to. Not the crowd. Not the alpha's voice, cold and ceremonial, reading my sentence like I was nothing more than a problem to be discarded. Not even my mother, standing at the edge of the gathering with her eyes fixed on the ground, refusing to look at me one last time. No. The part that broke something open inside me, the part that lives under my skin even now, is that they stripped my shoes from my feet before they pushed me toward the tree line. Because shoes are for pack members, and I was no longer one of them. My name is Selene Ashveil. Was an Omega of the Duskmore pack. The weakest rank. The lowest rung. The kind of wolf who exists only to be useful, to be quiet, to be grateful for every scrap of tolerance thrown her way. I had spent 19 years perfecting the art of smallness. Keeping my eyes down. Keeping my sense suppressed. Never shifting in front of the alphas. Never speaking unless spoken to. And none of it mattered, because on the last night of the blood moon, they decided I was dangerous, not because I had done something terrible, not because I had harmed anyone, broken any law, or challenged a single soul in that pack. They exiled me because I glowed, just once for just a moment while I slept. A soft silver light, they said, coming from under my skin, pulsing like something ancient was waking up inside me, and that terrified them more than any rogue wolf ever had. So they sent me into the killing forest. And everyone knows, that no one who enters the killing forest ever comes back alive. The forest edge, the tree line looked like a mouth. I know that sounds dramatic. I know it sounds like something a frightened child would say. But I'm telling you what I saw, and what I saw was a wall of ancient trees so tall they swallowed the sky. Their roots gnarled and knotted like fists, their bark the color of dried blood. The forest didn't just block the light. It ate it. The moonlight, which had been pale but present everywhere else, simply stopped at that border, as if even the moon knew better than to follow me in. Behind me, I could hear the pack, not their voices, they had gone quiet, but I could hear them the way wolves always hear each other, the low thrum of collective energy, the weight of many heartbeats, the specific silence of a group of people watching something and feeling nothing, no grief, no guilt, just relief. I was the problem being solved. My feet touched the first root, and I felt the bark bite into my bare skin. Cold, sharp, real. I focused on that, on the physical reality of each step, because if I let myself feel the other thing, the enormous hollow thing cracking open in my chest, I would fall apart. And I refused to fall apart in front of them. I would not give them that. So I walked until the sounds of the pack disappeared. Until the last trace of familiar scent, wood smoke, pine oil, the specific musk of Duskmore wolves, faded from the air. Until it was just me and the dark and the trees and the sound of my own breath, ragged and too fast, misting in the cold air. The killing forest had another name. An older one, Valewood. The elders spoke it in whispers when they thought the children weren't listening. They said it was cursed by a war fought before any living wolf could remember. That the trees grew over the bones of fallen alphas, drinking their power up through the roots, making the forest itself into something that hunted. They said rogue wolves gathered there, wolves who had lost their minds along with their packs, wolves who had gone feral, stripped of language and mercy and anything that made them more than animal. They said the forest was alive. And hungry. I had approximately 6 hours until dawn. I had no weapons. No food. No shelter. No shoes. I had survived worse. I kept telling myself that. First hour, the sounds the forest was loud in the way that truly dangerous places are loud, not with obvious threats, but with the constant low orchestra of things you cannot identify. Branches cracking from no wind. Something heavy moving parallel to me, just out of sight, matching my pace, a sound that was almost a voice, almost words, almost my name. I am not ashamed to tell you that my hands were shaking. That every few steps I stopped and pressed my back against a tree trunk, scanning the dark for shapes, listening with every cell I had. My wolf senses, even suppressed, even omega limited, were sharper than any human's. I could smell things, damp earth, decay, the sharp mineral smell of old blood on bark somewhere to my left. I could hear the specific way silence changes when something living is nearby and holding still. Something was holding still, just ahead. I stopped, it stopped. I breathed through my mouth, trying to keep my scent low, trying to think. Omegas don't fight. That's not self-pity, that's just the physical reality of the ranking system. An Omega's body is built for endurance, for healing, for connection. Not for combat. Against a feral rogue wolf, twice my size, twice my strength, with nothing left to lose, I had exactly one option. Run. But I didn't run. And I couldn't explain why. Some part of me, the same part that had glowed, the part that frightened my pack so thoroughly they'd rather send me to my death than understand it, went very quiet. Very still. Like something settling into place after years of being slightly, perpetually wrong. I put my hand on the nearest tree. And the forest breathed. Not metaphorically. I felt it. Under my palm, through the rough bark, a slow deep pulse, rhythmic, vast, like pressing your hand to the chest of something so enormous you'd never see its full shape. A heartbeat. Ancient and deliberate. And then, very slowly, the shape ahead of me, the thing that had been watching me, turned and walked away. Just like that, doggone. I stood there with my hand on that tree for what must have been several minutes, just breathing, trying to understand what had happened. I didn't understand it, not yet, but I moved forward. Second hour the ruins. I found the ruins by accident, which is to say I almost fell into them. The ground sloped downward without warning. The roots suddenly arranged like steps, or what might have been steps. A long time ago, and I grabbed a low branch to catch myself, and then I saw it. A structure. Old. Impossibly old. Stone walls so wrapped in vines and moss they barely read as walls anymore. A circular shape emerging from the forest floor like something the earth had grown rather than something built on top of it. No roof. Whatever had covered it had long since collapsed, leaving the interior open to the sky and the creeping branches above. The floor was stone, mostly intact and carved. Covered in carvings. I climbed down, moving carefully over the root steps, and knelt at the edge of the carvings. My fingers traced the shapes in the dark, spirals mostly. The specific spiral I had seen once in a very old pack record. A symbol the archivist had covered with his hand when he caught me looking. His expression suddenly guarded, the Ashveil spiral, my family sigil. My heart was doing something strange. Too fast and too slow at the same time. I looked up at the walls, and I could see it repeated everywhere, not just in the carvings on the floor but pressed into the stone itself, woven into the architecture the way a name is woven into a family. This place had been built by someone from my bloodline. Or built for someone from my bloodline. I found the inscription on the far wall, sheltered from the weather by a ledge of rock. The language was old, older than the common wolf tongue, older than the Duskmore records, older than anything I'd been taught. But somehow, looking at it, I could read it. Not translate it, read it, the way you read something you've always known but forgotten. For the keeper who will come when she is cast out. The forest knows you. The forest has been waiting. You were never weak. You were always a key. And now the door is open. I sat down on the cold stone floor of those ancient ruins, in the middle of the killing forest, exiled and barefoot and completely alone, and I cried, not from fear, not from grief. From something I hadn't felt in so long I'd almost forgotten it was a real thing, recognition. The shift in the forest, I don't know exactly when it changed. It wasn't a single moment, it was gradual. The way dawn comes, you don't see it happening, but then you look up and the dark is different. The forest that had been pressing in on me, tight and predatory and full of hostile watching, had shifted its weight. The sounds were the same. The shadows were the same. But the quality of the attention had changed. It was still watching me. But it was no longer considering whether to attack. It was recognizing me. Trees began to behave in ways trees do not behave. I don't expect you to simply believe this. I'm telling you what happened, and I understand how it sounds. Branches that should have been in my way were not in my way. The ground beneath my bare feet, which should have been brutal, should have been destroying me with cold and rocks and sharp things, was somehow softer where I stepped. Not soft like moss, but soft like intention. Like the earth itself was making a small accommodation for me. And the light, the moonlight that had stopped at the tree line, it was finding me inside the forest. Through gaps in the canopy that seemed to open precisely where I needed them. Shafts of silver following me like slow spotlights, cool and clean and impossibly bright against the surrounding dark. I had spent my whole life being unseen. Being the Omega who took up no space, made no impression, left no mark on a room when she entered or left it. The forest saw me. The forest had always seen me, I think. I think it had been waiting for a very, very long time. The rogue came out of the dark at a run. Later, I would understand that he hadn't been hunting me. He'd been running from something, crashing through the underbrush in blind panic, not even processing what was ahead of him until he was nearly on top of me. But in that moment, all I knew was that something enormous and wolf-shaped was barreling toward me out of the shadows, and my body went absolutely cold with terror. He was huge. Even in the dark I could see that, far larger than any wolf in Duskmoor, broader and taller, built like violence had been poured into a human shape. His clothes were destroyed, barely held together, and I could smell the fresh blood on him before I could see the wounds. He stopped when he saw me. Just stopped dead in his tracks, like hitting a wall. We stared at each other. His eyes were gold. Not the warm amber that some wolves carry, but a pure metallic gold. The kind of color that lives at the center of a candle flame. Alpha eyes. Even here, even half destroyed, even in the middle of the killing forest, undeniably, unmistakably alpha. And he looked at me like he was seeing something impossible. You're standing in the Valewood, he said. His voice was rough, like he hadn't used it in a long time, alone. Yes, I said. Proud of how steady my voice came out. You should be dead. Rude observation. Also slightly inaccurate. Something moved through his face, not quite amusement, not quite confusion. Something between them. He looked around, and I watched him register what I had already noticed, that the forest was different around me. That the light was different. That something large and territorial was watching both of us, and it was doing it from my side. Who are you? He asked. Selene Ashveil, I said. I was exiled tonight. Who are you? A long pause. His jaw tightened. Kale Voss. I didn't recognize the name, but I recognized the way he said it. The flat, practiced way people say things they've had to say to many times, things that used to mean something and now are just sounds to get through. He'd been out here for a while. What were you running from? I asked. His gold eyes came back to mine. A pack of ferals. 6 of them. They caught my scent about 2 miles back. I calculated this. They'll follow it here, yes. We were quiet for a moment, both of us listening to the forest. In the distance, not very far in the distance, I could hear them. The specific cacophony of feral wolves on a scent trail, howling, crashing, no strategy, just hunger and fury. You should run, Kale said. He was already positioning himself between me and the sound, which struck me as both instinctively protective and also somewhat presumptuous. I don't think I need to, I said. He looked at me like I had lost my mind. And then the ferals hit the tree line of whatever space we were standing in, and the forest responded. I felt it before I saw it. A deep, resonant pulse from the ground under my feet, a vibration in the air, the specific quality of a very large thing drawing itself up to full height. The trees at the edge of the clearing, if you could call it a clearing, it was more like a space the forest had chosen to open, began to move. Not in the wind. Purposefully. Roots lifting from the earth, branches lowering, forming a wall so dense and immediate it was like watching a gate close. The pharaohs crashed into it and couldn't get through. I could hear their confusion, their snarling frustration, the way they scratched and bit at the wood, and the wood simply reformed around every damage they dealt. UNBOTHERED. Eternal. Patient in the way that only very old things can afford to be patient. Kale Voss had gone completely still beside me. After a long moment, he said, "What are you?" I looked at my hands. In the moonlight, I could see it, the faintest silver luminescence under my skin, pulsing softly, the same thing that had gotten me exiled, the same thing my pack had feared. I have absolutely no idea, I said honestly, but I think I'm figuring it out. The night deepens. Kale's story: we made camp in the ruins I'd found. Kale's wounds needed tending, and I had surprisingly good instincts for that. Omega trait. The elders always said it dismissively, like healing was a lesser skill. The bleeding was bad. He'd fought off more than I'd seen tonight. I realized. The wounds were layered. Old ones and new ones both. The body of someone who had been surviving rather than living for a long time. He didn't want to talk. I didn't push. We sat on either side of a small fire. He'd been carrying a flint, which impressed me, and after a long while he started speaking. Not because I asked, because, I think. The forest made the silence a safe kind of silence. And he hadn't had that in a long time. He had been an alpha of the Voss pack. 3 years ago, his pack had been destroyed, not in battle, not by rogues, but from within. A coup. His second in command, working with a rival pack, had orchestrated a political collapse so complete and ruthless that by the time Kale understood what was happening, he was already standing in ash and ruin with nothing left to protect. He'd survived. He hadn't particularly wanted to. He'd been in the Valewood for 8 months. Not because he couldn't leave, but because, he said, something had kept him here. Like the forest wasn't finished with him yet. The forest kept you alive, I said. It wasn't a question. He looked at me sideways. I thought it was just luck. Chance. The pharaohs should have gotten me months ago. It was waiting, I said. I think it was waiting for me to arrive, and it needed someone too. I don't know. Help. Be here when I got here. He stared at me for a long moment. That's an insane theory. You've been living in a cursed, supposedly lethal forest for 8 months and haven't died, I said. How's your theory holding up? A silence, then for the first time, something that might, in very dim lighting, with low expectations, be described as a smile, brief, reluctant, gone almost immediately. Tell me about your bloodline, he said. So I did. The Ashveils, what little I knew of them. My mother had never spoken about our family history. I'd grown up knowing only that we were Omegas, that we had always been Omegas, that the Ashveil name was old but carried no particular weight in any living pack. But I'd found things over the years. A page in an archive text with our spiral. A reference in a history of the old wars to the Veil Keepers, a bloodline of wolves who served a different function than the standard pack hierarchy, not fighters, not leaders, but something else. Something the text described as threshold guardians. Wolves who stood between the living world and the places where the veil between worlds was thin. Wolves for whom cursed ground was not cursed at all, but consecrated. Wolves who had been systematically erased from pack histories because the alpha hierarchies that rose to power after the old wars had found them threatening. Threshold guardians, Kale repeated. I think the forest is a threshold, I said. I think my family built it or woke it. Or something. And you? I think I'm supposed to be its keeper. I looked up at the sky through the broken roof, at the stars and the moon. I think being exiled here wasn't a death sentence. I think it was the best thing that ever happened to me. The silver waking had happened just before dawn. I had fallen asleep against the stone wall, and I dreamed in a way I had never dreamed before, not images but knowing. Information poured into me like water into a vessel that hadn't realized it was hollow. Names of trees. Names of roots. The geography of the Valewood in its entirety, mapped onto the inside of my closed eyes in silver lines. Every path and clearing an ancient marker and hidden water source. The 17 rogue wolves currently sheltering in the eastern groves. The ones who still had their minds, still had their names. Who had come here not because they were feral but because they had nowhere else to go. The 6 feral wolves from earlier, and exactly where in the forest they would sleep during the day, exhausted from their pursuit. The 2 pack scouts from rival territories who had been circling the Valewood's edges for weeks, taking notes. Reporting back to alphas who were considering whether the killing forest might have resources worth the risk. The Valewood's history, 3,000 years of it, poured into me in an hour of sleeping. When I woke up, I was glowing. Not faintly. Not the pale silver shimmer that had gotten me exiled. This was full, steady luminescence, emanating from my skin in soft waves, and it didn't hurt, and it didn't frighten me, and when I looked down at my bare feet I could see silver veins of light running from my soles down into the stone beneath them, connecting me to the floor, to the roots beneath the floor, to the enormous living network that ran under every inch of the Valewood. Kale was awake. He was watching me from across the dead fire with those gold eyes, and whatever he was feeling, it was complicated. I could see him processing it, the awe, the wariness, the instinctive alpha response of wanting to categorize and rank this thing he was seeing, and failing, because what he was seeing didn't fit any category. How do you feel? He asked. Like myself, I said. For the first time. I stood up. The stone was warm under my feet now. The forest outside the ruined walls was alert and present. The way a very well-trained guardian is present. Not aggressive, but absolutely, unconditionally there. Ready, Kale, I said. I know where the rogue wolves are. The ones who still have their minds. The ones who came here because they had nowhere else to go. He was quiet. This forest is mine, I continued. Whatever that means, whatever it makes me, it's mine. And I think it can be more than a place people come to die. I think that's what it was corrupted into after my family was erased. But that's not what it was made to be. What was it made to be? He asked. A sanctuary, I said. For wolves the pack systems failed. Something moved through his face. Something that looked like the ghost of everything he'd lost, passing through him and leaving something cleaner in its wake. You're talking about rebuilding, he said. I'm talking about building something new, I said, something different. He was quiet for a long time. The dawn light was coming in now, real dawn, the kind that comes with color and warmth. And it lit up the carvings on the walls. Made the Ashveil spirals glow gold. You're an Omega, he said finally, the thing he'd been. Not saying. I'm a keeper, I said. And you're a packless alpha with nothing to lose and 8 months of experience surviving in a forest that has apparently been waiting for both of us. I met his gold eyes. The question isn't about rank. The question is whether you trust what you've seen tonight. A long silence. Then Kale Voss, former alpha, the man who had survived the unsurvivable by sheer force of will and the quiet mercy of a forest that wasn't ready to let him go yet, stood up. What do you need me to do? He asked. Closing, the beginning they told me the killing forest would be my grave. They took my shoes because I wasn't worth the material anymore. They stood at the tree line and watched me walk into the dark and thought, good riddance, problem solved. I want you to understand something. I am not angry at them anymore. Anger requires them to still matter, and they matter the way all closed chapters matter. They happened, they shaped me, and now they are behind me. What's in front of me is this: a forest of 3,000 years, breathing under my feet, knowing my name. 17 lost wolves who woke up this morning to find that the ground they'd been sleeping on had softened overnight, that the paths between their shelters had cleared, that something in the air felt different, felt like the difference between surviving and something else, something more. A packless alpha with gold eyes and a complicated history, and the particular stubborn survival instinct of someone who has not yet figured out what they're surviving for. And me? Selene Ashveil. Omega. Keeper. Standing in the middle of the killing forest with bare feet and silver light under my skin, and more power in my bloodline than my entire former pack would know what to do with. They were so afraid of what I might become that they sent me to the one place in the world designed to complete me. I rose at dawn in a ruined temple built by my ancestors, and I looked out at the forest that had claimed me, and I felt, for the first time in my 19 years of carefully maintained smallness, vast, big enough for my own life, big enough for more. I pressed my hand to the nearest tree. I'm here, I told it. The whole forest sighed. We know, it answered back. We've been waiting, and so it began, not with a rescue, not with a hero riding in from somewhere else, with a girl they threw away. Finding out exactly what she was worth, in the place where they sent her to disappear.